rocks that are likely to hold fossils. A lot of things have to come together for an animal to be fossilized. For starters, it has to be in the right kind of setting where sediments form. And soon after it dies, it has to be buried, before its remains are ravaged by decay, weather, or scavengers. The dirt and mud burying it has to harden sufficiently to protect what's left for thousands, or more likely millions of years. After which, something, say erosion, has to bring the embedded remains to the surface. And then, someone who cares about such things, like me or my longtime colleague Ted Deschler, has to wander by and find it. The fossils I wanted to find would have been alive in the Devonian era, between 365 and 385 million years ago. But where can we find the right kinds of rocks from that era?
Are you still seeing these legends? I remember sitting in the office, and we were doing this sort of usual banter one day about something geological. We had college textbook. You just thumbing through the diagrams of the book, and boom, there was this figure that changed our lives. I remember seeing that and saying to myself, holy cow, this is what we're looking for.
It was a map of North America, which highlighted 3 areas of Devonian rock of just the right type to hold fossil fish moving onto land. 2 of those areas had already been worked on, so we focused on the 3rd, the Canadian Arctic.
My heart was racing when I saw that, because, and I'm sure yours was too, I mean, no paleontologist had worked on that, expressly looking for early tetrapods. Then you dug out the aerial photos, and that's when I got kind of terrified. I remember seeing this for the first time, thinking, you gotta be kidding me. You know, look at all this snow, how do you work there?
The Arctic presents some unusual challenges. You're far from help, so you have to bring everything you'll need. And you have to move fast because the season is short. And you don't want to be there when the weather turns.
All right, let's not put up the 3.
So when the helicopter drops you off in Arctic for the first time, you're standing here saying, what am I doing here? You know, you're thinking about polar bears. That's the first thing you look for. Is there anything on the landscape? Everything white becomes a polar bear with your first year. The last thing on your mind are fossils.
It's hard to believe when you look out across this frozen terrain that once this was a warm, watery world swimming with life.
There's this huge disconnect between the present and the past. What we see today is a valley with red and green rocks that are tilted, stacked one on top of the other. But that's not how it was in the past. These valleys have been carved by glaciers that have moved back and forth. And those red and green rocks actually at one point extended across the valley. And they were straight, they weren't tilted. Now look inside the rocks, and what those rocks tell us, that this valley, 375 million years ago, was a giant floodplain. And that floodplain was filled with rivers that swelled their banks and sometimes shrunk, but in those conditions formed swamps and streams of all different sizes. And inside those streams was diverse life.
Including, we suspected, a fish with features that would ultimately enable animals to walk on land. But even if it had been there, could we find evidence of it buried on one of the nameless hillsides that had built up and eroded over the past 375 million years? So how do you find fossils?
I pick up a lot of stuff, right? Sometimes it's just a piece of rock. Sometimes it's bird poop. Sometimes it's a leaf. But occasionally, you know, it's a jaw with teeth in it. So what you begin to learn is to tell the difference between white, which is not bone, and white, which is bone, teeth, or scale. Once you have that in your mind, then you start to apply that search image to other rocks. Here's another scale here that stands out like a sore thumb. And then we go, if you look around, right here, okay? So this is the underside of a skull. So you never know where you're gonna hit it around here. You know, that's why we keep on looking.
But that first expedition ended without finding what we had come for.
Did they find a transitional organism? No. So what does that mean? They have to do what?
And as our second trip drew to a close, we were still searching. Then, a bit before our scheduled departure, we had a real scare.
The team had separated. The idea is everybody needs to return back to camp by radio call. You guys see Jason? No, I asked Jason. You see Jason? I asked you that question. You didn't see Jason. All of a sudden, beginning, where's Jason? This is our youngest member. We were looking out for him the entire season, and no Jason. I mean, my heart was really beginning to race. I hear footsteps outside the tent. There's Jason. His eyes are like globes. And he's like, I found it. I mean, every pocket was burgeoning with bones. He was like, I got these bones. He's laying them out on the table one after another. It's daylight 24 hours a day. So we ran down to Jason's site. As soon as we came to this bluff here and looked down, we saw why Jason was so excited. Because beneath our feet were fossil fish bones, fragments of fossil fish, many of them, thousands of them. It wasn't just one fish, it was a whole aquarium. It was different species. It got better. Because as we walked up the hill, and we followed that carpet of fossil fragments, it stopped, meaning it likely came from one layer. And if we had any luck at all, we'd find that layer and see what's inside.
Hard as we tried, we couldn't discover what was buried in Jason's hill before we had to leave. But we kept coming back to it in following years, to dig, chip, and search.
The second week of July in 2004, we're all working in serious in this hole, you know, where my head is right next to Farish's feet. And Farish's feet is next to Steve Gates, and we're digging together. And Steve says, hey guys, what's this? Ted and I go running over to see what Steve was referring to. And what we saw was this V here. It was covered with rock. And as soon as we saw this V, and we saw these teeth under it, it became very clear that this little V we're seeing is the tip of a snout. And that this was the snout of a flat-headed fish. And it was sticking out of the rock. So if we had any luck whatsoever, the rest of the creature would be encased in the rock. And here it is. What's really wonderful about this specimen is that we have pretty much the whole thing. And the whole thing is put together. That is, the head is connected to the body, and the body is connected to the fins. So we know that this fin comes from this body. And when we put it all together, we see this creature's about 4 feet long, and some of the biggest were about 9 feet long. What's really amazing is that this is an animal that Darwin would have predicted. A real mix of characteristics, a combination of fish-like and tetrapod-like features. Like a fish, it has scales in its back, and it also has fins with fin rays. But like a tetrapod, it has a flat head with eyes on top. And when we look inside the body, we see these huge interlocking ribs that suggested that it had lungs. When you put the body and the head together, you see it had a neck where the head could move independently of the body. What that means this animal could use the neck to peer outside the water, find prey, and avoid predators. So we have many bones of these animals, including this one, which is a hip bone of these creatures. And what it reveals is that the hind fins were already evolving into legs while these animals were living in water.
Ooh. So this animal, did it have fins or legs?
Both.
It had fins, but what were the fins doing?
Well,
Okay, I repeat that part.
Find prey and avoid predators.
Write that down.
So we have many bones of these animals, including this one, which is a hip bone of these creatures. And what it reveals is that the hind fins were already evolving into legs while these animals were living in water.
I get really excited when I see the front fins of Tiktaalik.
All right, here we go. So, the scientists set out to find that missing organism in between the Houston octagon and the Kansas stega, right? Did they find it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes? Did they find they did?
Yeah.
All right, what was the name of that organism?
Typically.
Very good. Thank you for trying. Go ahead. All right. So yes, they found that transitional organism. What was the name, Wayne? The Tiktaalik. Everyone say Tiktaalik. All right. Here we go. Does this organism look like the organism you drew? Go ahead. Take a look right? Huh?
You like Jeremiah.
It looked like Jeremiah. Look, Jeremiah. Oh, you woke up for that, huh? All right, go ahead. Compare that organism to your organism, right? Okay, so here we go. Turn back to, and this is just an artist drawing, and that is the actual Tiktaalik fossil. Go back to your timeline, all right? If I write on the board, what should you do?
Right.
All right, so here we go. Scientists were very excited because they finally found that organism, right? What is that transitional organism that's in between the Houston Opteron and the Acanthostega? What's the name of it? Come on. Tiktaalik. All right, let's write that down. You ready? T-I-K. Tiktaalik. All right, here we go. You ready? Let's go back to the Houston Opteron. Let's go back to the Houston Opteron. What are the characteristics of the Houston Opteron? What is the main characteristic that we took note of? It's what? What's the characteristics of the Houston Opteron? What makes the Houston Opteron a fish? Huh? It has fins, all right. If you don't have that down, what else does it have? A vertebrae. Very good. Let's write that down. Right? It also has a vertebrae. What does it have? Very good. Okay. What do we know about where it lived?
It lives in water.
How do you know it lived in water? Because what? Come on. Because it had gills. What else did it have? We just said it. Go ahead. Yeah. It had fins and all that good stuff, right? Okay, so here we go. When we're looking at the Acanthostega, right, what are the characteristics that separate the Acanthostega from the Houston Opteron? What's the main thing that separates it? Huh? It had paddles. Very good. All right. What are some similarities between the Acanthostega and the Houston Opteron? I want to hear from some people I usually don't hear from. What are some of the similarities? So we have the difference, right? Fins versus paddles. But what do they have in common? They lived in water, and it's also a what? Very good. Am I spelling this right? V-E-R-T. I'll figure it out. All right, very good. A vertebrae, right? What about Produrpes? What is it that Produrpes has in common with Houston Opteron and the Acanthostega? Does it live in water? It lives on land. But what does it have that's similar or the same as the Acanthostega and the Houston Opteron? Don't just call out. Actually take the time to look. It has a what? It has a vertebrae. V-E-R, vertebrae. All right? Very good. Okay, so the Tiktaalik. We're getting there, right? What does the Tiktaalik have that all of these have? All of them has to have it. It has a vertebrae. Right? Very good. Where did the Tiktaalik live? In the water, all right? However, but it can what? It can come above. What allowed it to come above the water? Its neck. What else? It had lungs. And it had fins, but its fins started to look like what? Feet. So it had fin feet. That's what we're going to call it. All right, here we go. You ready? Huh? All right, so you ready? When we're looking for transitional organisms, right? We're looking for that thing that they all have in common, from the water to the land. What is that thing that they all have in common? What I want you to do is just write it big on the bottom of your page. What is that thing that they all have in common? And I'm going to come around to see what you have. I did not say call it out. I said write down. What is that thing that they all have in common? That thing that connects us from land to water. All right, so as I walk around, I'm seeing that you guys have the right answer. What is that thing that connects